All right, so we are on the record. This is ERD case number CR2021-00113, EEOC case number 26G2021-00241C. The complainant is Janie Holmes. The respondent is Oakwood Village, doing business as Prairie Ridge, I believe. I'm Administrative Law Judge Stephanie Brown. It is May 10th, 2022 at approximately 1 p.m. We're here for a hearing on the merits of the complaint, which falls from a discrimination complaint that Ms. Holmes filed against, she identified Oakwood East as the respondent in the discrimination complaint that she filed with the Equal Rights Division on January 14th, 2021. And in that complaint, she alleged discrimination on the basis of pregnancy or maternity. After an investigation of that complaint, on July 30th of 2021, an investigator for the Equal Rights Division issued an initial determination finding probable cause to believe that the respondent may have violated the Wisconsin Fair Employment Law by discriminating against the complainant in terms or conditions of employment because of pregnancy, childbirth, maternity leave, or related medical conditions, and terminating the employment of the complainant because of pregnancy, childbirth, maternity leave, or related medical conditions. Based on that initial determination finding probable cause for discrimination on those two issues, the complaint was certified to a hearing on the merits, which is again why we're here this afternoon now. The hearing was originally scheduled for 9:30 a.m. this morning. Both I and the respondent's representative appeared at that time. We waited till about 10 a.m. Before going on the record. Ms. Holmes did not appear at that time, but shortly thereafter, I think it was about 10:35 or so, I received a voicemail, excuse me, she called me. I missed the first call, but then she called back a minute or two later, and we did speak at that time. And Ms. Holmes had mentioned that she had a lot of things going on at work, that she had uh, uh, put the reminder for the hearing on her phone for 11 a.m. Rather than 9:30 a.m. And she was in the middle of moving in a resident and some things this morning. And so I conveyed to Ms. Holmes to just put that in writing, send it to me, and I'll consider whether or not to reschedule the hearing. I had also mentioned to Ms. Ochoa when we were waiting that, if I had received any communications from Ms. Holmes, I would forward them to her before making a decision. And after receiving that email, I did forward that to Ms. Ochoa, and she had responded back in an email saying that she did not object to the hearing being rescheduled if it fit within their schedule. And so we had some follow-up communications, and both of you agreed to reschedule the hearing for this afternoon at 1 p.m. My understanding, though, is Ms. Ochoa, that you kind of got another event that's come up now. So we're looking at holding this hearing between 1 and 3 p.m. But as I stated to the two of you last week, kind of because you are the only two that are going to be testifying, I hopefully think that we'll be able to get through the hearing here this afternoon in that 2-hour time frame. Ms. Holmes, do you have any questions about the issues that are before me this afternoon?
I don't. And thank you, Ms. Ochoa, for rescheduling. I really appreciate it.
Ms. Ochoa, do you have any questions about the issues before me this afternoon for the hearing? All
I,
right. As I had mentioned, we're going to start with Ms. Holmes's testimony first because it is her burden of proof. I will start, Ms. Holmes, by asking you some questions. There may be some things that we don't address during my questioning, so I'll give you an opportunity if there's other things you want to testify about to do that. And then I'll give Ms. Ochoa an opportunity if there's any questions she wants to ask you to ask those questions. When you're done presenting your testimony and your evidence, I will ask Ms. Ochoa some questions, um, give her an opportunity as well if there's anything that we don't address in her questions to bring that up. And then Ms. Holmes, you'll have an opportunity to ask Ms. Ochoa any questions. We can keep going back and forth like that. As I stated last week during our final pre-hearing, the only evidence I consider is what's presented here today. So just make sure before we end the hearing here this afternoon that you've presented all the evidence that you want me to consider. As I mentioned as well, I won't be issuing a decision today, but this is our opportunity to kind of get all the evidence in. So whatever you want to get in, just make sure that you do that here this afternoon. Any questions from either one of you about the process this afternoon?
I have no questions. I
All
can
right.
hear Miss Ochoa's audio though.
Oh, I think she's muted. That's why.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
That's
I
that's
was
okay.
like, is she talking? I just can't hear her. Sorry. Okay.
No, that's okay. All right. So, Miss Holmes, if you could raise your right hand, I'll have to swear you in first. Do you solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the testimony you will give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right. You can put your hand down. And could you state for me and spell your name, please?
Sure. Janie Holmes, JANIEHOLMES.
And what is your current mailing address?
5907 Milwaukee Street, apartment 202, Madison, Wisconsin, 53718.
And at some point, you worked for Oakwood Village or Prairie Ridge. Is that correct?
Yes.
When did you work for that company or that entity, if you recall?
I believe it was September 2020 is when I first got hired. September.
Okay. And I had mentioned that at least according to our information, the company itself is called Oakwood Village, but I believe that Prairie Ridge was at the location where you worked at, Miss Holmes, Prairie Ridge.
I worked at a couple different. I think Prairie Ridge is the independent living, if I recall correctly. But I also worked in the memory care and the assisted living. But I think, if I remember correctly, the Prairie Ridge is just the independent living. I don't know if that's correct or not.
So were there other facilities around where you worked, or how did that? Can you, if as best you can you explain that to me?
I think Oakwood is just the big name for it, and then they have little like villages, if you will, on the inside of Oakwood. So um, I was hired through Oakwood, and I think it's just like so like the living is called Prairie Ridge, and then the other little how do I say it units in the facility are called different names.
Okay.
I think that's correct.
All right. And what was the position that you held while you worked there?
A resident assistant.
Okay. And could you briefly explain to me what the job duties are of a resident assistant?
Um, providing cares for residents.
And is that pretty much any kind of care that the resident needs then?
Yes.
And you said that you believe you worked at other units. Did you work at the memory care and the assisted living parts
Yes.
of it as well?
Yes. Through my training, yes. I
Okay.
was trained in all the.
Did the job duties of a resident assistant differ depending on if you were working in the independent living part versus the memory care part
Um,
versus?
yes. 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 So as far as do you want me to go into details?
Sure, sure.
So for memory care, there are some residents that can't walk. So you would need to use maybe lifts or help them up, like lift them with like a gate belt, if you will. Whereas independent living, they live independently, so mostly can walk, no lifts. Usually, you just go in and pass meds there, assist with showers, do light cleaning, stuff like that. Where in memory care and the assisted living, and I can't think of what the other unit was called, but it's more heavy lifting, if you will.
And you said you were trained at all three of those areas, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
When did you actually start? And I believe you said you worked there in September 2020. Were you training in September 2020 as well?
Yes.
And when you started working, did you only work then at the independent living part of it, or did you also work at the other two parts?
I worked at the other two.
Okay. And did you have a certain schedule that you would work, like certain days of the week or certain hours of the day?
I know it was 7 to 3. I can't quite remember my off days. It was so far back, but it was every other weekend, and it was 7 to 3. I want to say 7 to 3 or 6 to 2.
And that would be 6 or 7 a.m.
Yes,
to,
sorry, 3
okay,
p.m.
okay.
I think I want to say 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. I can't quite remember.
That's fine. If you don't remember any, you don't have to guess. Just let us know that you don't remember something. That's fine.
Perfect.
Um, do you recall what you were paid while you worked there
Mm, I want to say 14.63
per hour?
per hour.
And I didn't do the math in my head, but when you said you were working either 6 to 2 or 7 to 3, were you typically working at about 40 hours a week or okay?
Yes.
Were you working any overtime at all that you can recall?
No, I was not.
Okay. And while you were employed there, do you recall who your supervisor was, whoever the person was you reported to?
Mm, I don't recall
Okay.
because I was in so many different areas.
So each area that you were in, you would have been reporting to someone different?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as I stated, the basis for your discrimination complaint is pregnancy discrimination. So I guess my first question in related to that is, um, at some point you found out you were pregnant in 2020. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when you learned that you were pregnant?
I know it was sometime in September. I found out in September. I want to. I gotta. I
Okay.
want to say the end of September. Yes.
And just looking at your discrimination complaint, um, just take the narrative section. Um, you wrote on the complaint form that at the time you were hired at Oakwood, you didn't know you were pregnant. Is that still your testimony today?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay.
I think I
And
remember when I was doing my TB test is actually the same day. So I was already hired. It was. I think it was the same day. It was either my TB test or another testing that I had that I found out I was pregnant.
okay.
I was in my training.
Yeah, you wrote on your complaint form that shortly after the day of orientation, you found out you were having twins. Um, is
Yes, ma'am.
that does that sound correct to you?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And then you continue to write about a week or so later, you lost one of the babies. So that would put us somewhere in like the middle of the month, you think, when that happened? Or, okay. And then you wrote that after you lost the first baby, um, you were put on restrictions to not lift, push, or pull 20 pounds. Is that accurate?
Yes, ma'am. That was to ensure that the other baby was safe in the womb and would have a chance. I'm high risk anyways, so
Okay. And then did you inform anybody at Oakwood that you were pregnant after you found out that you were pregnant?
yes.
Who did you talk to about that?
The nurse that did my TB test, and I can't remember her name at the time. I want to say, I want to say, no, I can't remember her name.
She was an employee at Oakwood?
Yes.
Okay. And so again, this was after you were hired, but before you actually officially started working there then?
Yes. Well, I was I was doing training classes, so I guess before I got on the floor, you could say, because
Okay.
I was on the, I was clocking in. So
Okay. And I think then you would have gone through the orientation already. So you've gone through orientation, you're in training, but you're not, I guess I'm trying to think how to describe it. When you're in training, you said you're clocking in, but are you like under someone's supervision, or like what's the difference between being in training versus, I guess, when you're not in training?
So when I are you talk so when I found out I was pregnant, I was doing the there's like refresher classes, if you will, for your CBRF certifications. So I was um just watching video, or not videos. Somebody came in and I can't even think what it's called right now. I'm sorry. Retraining for your certification, basically. So we sat in a room and learned how to redo our, fresher upper on our certs. And then when I lost baby, I was working on the floor.
Okay. And did you tell anybody besides the nurse who did your TB test that you were pregnant, first of all?
I did tell my trainer, so whoever I was getting trained would report to.
You don't remember the name of that person?
I don't.
Okay, that's fine.
That, yeah, that I try not to. It was hard. That's it, that whole scenario. So if I get upset, a little upset, I'm sorry. It's hard to talk about.
You mentioned in your complaint someone by the name of Emily K. Does that name ring a bell at all?
Yes, that's who I sent. Emily K and Ashley, a lady named Ashley, is who I sent the doctor note to because they're in HR, or they were in HR.
Okay. And when you say you sent the doctor note, I'm going to show you one of the exhibits that Miss Ochoa identified as a possible hearing exhibit. I'm going to show it on the screen, so just give me a second to bring that up. Can you see a document on your screen right now?
I can.
Okay, and I can make it a little bit smaller to try to get it all on the one screen. Is this the doctor note you're referring to?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so this you said you gave to Emily and Ashley,
Yes.
and um, it's dated September 23rd, 2020. Do you believe approximately that's when you gave it to them?
Yes.
Do you recall if they said anything to you, and if so, what they said to you when you provided that to them?
Yes. They said that they were going to have a meeting and they would get back to me within a few days. And I remember working approximately a week, or probably a little over a week, before they got back to me with it.
And when they got back to you, I guess first of all, which one got back to you? Was it Ashley, Emily, or both?
And
Emily?
mhm,
And what do you recall what she told you?
yes, I was told to immediately clock out, that I was terminated because they could not accommodate my restrictions.
Did you say anything in response when you were told that your employment was being terminated?
I just asked why they couldn't find accommodations, because I knew there was accommodations that I could have worked without lifting or pulling or all that, and they just kept telling me they couldn't accommodate them.
And you said you knew that there were accommodations. What, I guess, how, first of all, how do you know that?
Because I know at that time it was when COVID was really um, at a high peak, I guess, and they were people at the front door doing almost like hours. There was a lot of openings for shifts where you could sit at the front door and just take temperatures. So there would be no lifting, taking temperatures. I have a list of things that I feel like I could have been accommodated, even in an independent living. I had brought that to their attention, that there's no lifting in independent living. Independent living. I'm sorry. Um, and they said that if there was a fall, that there would be lifting, but that they usually, if there's a fall, there would be needing two people anyways. So I feel like that could have been accommodated. If it did come up, we could figure out from there. Cleaning, laundry, charting, serving, passing meds, all those are no lifting um, activities that I could have participated in, I feel like.
I heard cleaning, passing meds, serving, but I think I missed something there.
Working in the kitchen, laundry, charting, serving, like serving food, cleaning up the dishes, stuff like that.
Now, the jobs that you mentioned, are those independent positions or are those duties that as a resident assistant you would be required to do anyway?
I think everything except working in the kitchen obviously is we do all the med passing, we do laundry, we do cleaning as a RA, yes. Passing meds, RAs.
So you said other than like working in the kitchen,
Yeah. And
that's
as
a
far
separate position?
yes, and as far as taking temps, anybody could sign up for that at the time. There was like a big sign up sheet that you could have signed up as many shifts as you want to take temperatures at the front door. And
Okay.
as I recall, there was a lady that had worked in the same area as me, and she had a knee um, injury, and so she was down there also getting hours, um, taking temperatures because she was on restrictions.
Were you aware of any policies? You just mentioned this woman who had a knee injury. Were you aware of any policies that Oakwood had about people if they were injured at work or had an injury, what would happen?
Um, I was aware, but I knew that it's or I thought that it would be a little bit different because it was a pregnancy injury. Well, not injury, but it was due to pregnancy, something that I couldn't help. I remember signing the policies and procedures though.
The woman that you referenced with the knee injury, do you remember her name?
I don't remember her name. No,
Do you recall if her knee injury was work related or something that happened outside of work, if you know at all?
I think it was outside of work.
You had gone through a few minutes ago about the different jobs that you thought that you could do or the different duties that you thought you could do. Did you share that with Emily when she told you you were being terminated?
I did tell her that I could be working. I feel like I could work in independent living, as there was no lifting, and that's when she told me that if there was a fall, that that was the reason I couldn't work there. If a resident had fallen,
Okay. Did you mention like the passing meds and cleaning and anything like that to her when she made that comment?
I asked her. I told her that I mean, I believe I told her that I would do anything that I could to keep my job because losing a job and a baby all in the same week is really hard. So I told her I could do anything. I even told her that if I get my restrictions lifted, could I still be employed there because I was so desperate to keep that job at the time. I'm a single mother of 3 children, so
When you made that comment about if you could get the restrictions lifted, could you continue working there? Did she have a response to that?
I'm pretty sure she just told me that they've made their decision, basically.
Other than the job that you were mentioning about checking temperatures, were you aware if the company had any kind of like light duty or those types of assignments available on a regular basis to individuals?
I was not aware. I didn't know for sure. I did ask, and I don't think there was much help for them to. They just kind of, I feel like they just kind of made their decision, and that was that.
Okay. Um, at some point, did you have your baby in I guess it would be sometime in 2021,
I did, April.
April 2021?
Yes, I had my daughter.
And after your employment ended, and I believe in your discrimination complaint, you wrote that you were terminated on October 1st of 2020. Does that sound accurate?
Yes, ma'am.
So between October 1st of 2020 and when your daughter was born in April of 2021, did you work anyplace else?
I did.
Okay, when was the first time you started working after your employment ended at Oakwood Village?
December 20th, 2020. Yeah, 2020. Yeah. December 20th is when I got hired at my job.
So about, what would that be, about 3 months later or
Yeah,
so, or I guess 2 months later?
2 months, yes.
Not a little, like 2.5 months or something, I guess.
Yeah.
And you said that's the current job that you hold now?
Yes, ma'am.
And where is that?
Kindred Hearts of Cottage Grove.
And I believe in one of the emails you sent today, you said you're a director there. Is that correct?
I got hired as assistant director, and then last year September is when I was hired as director. Yes.
When you started as the assistant director, what hours were you working?
Eight, like 8 to 4, 9 to 5. It all varied. I could pick my hours. 6 to 2 sometimes. My schedule is I can make my own schedule basically as long as I do my 86 hours in the 2 weeks.
86 hours, 2 weeks, you said?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that the same as the director now? Same
Yeah,
type of schedule?
yeah.
Um, when you started as the assistant director, do you recall what you were being paid?
16,
And as the director, how much are you being paid?
18.25. I'm salary, so it's 38,000 a year.
During the period of time when you were not working, so from the month of October, November, and then the early part of December, did you receive any other kind of income, like unemployment insurance benefits or anything like that?
No.
And then you said your daughter was born in April. Did you take off any time to get like around her birth, either before or after you had her?
Just the 6 weeks after I had her. Yes. In the week, it was actually no. I'm sorry. I took 8 weeks off for her, and I think it was 9 total because I took the week off before I had her because I was having a little bit of complications. As I stated earlier, I'm high risk, so they watched me really, really closely.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Did you have any other restrictions other than the lifting? Actually, here it just says lifting. It doesn't talk about pushing or pulling. Did you have
Yeah.
any other restrictions?
No, and shortly after, I would like to add, shortly after I started at Kindred Hearts, those were lifted as I was when I got into a safe place in my pregnancy. They were lifted.
Right. Let me just make sure I didn't forget to ask you anything. Is there anything else you want to testify about?
I don't. I just had the few. As I was looking up the Federal Pregnancy Act, and there
Hmm.
was two pieces of that I seen in here. So those.
I only looked like I had only one page, but is there anything specific about this page that you want to mention?
Just under. Let me see. That's the page. Um, just the under the discrimination and work situations. I just feel like that says right there that it's a discrimination. Or no, the first one. Hold on. Let me see which one I'm reading. I guess both of them. I feel like it was discrimination because I lost a child. It's not I didn't it's nothing I could help or and then I got fired due to my restrictions, which was because of my pregnancy and losing a child. So, and they said right in my termination paper that I got fired due to my restrictions, which had to do with my pregnancy. So
Okay.
that's all I wanted to add. And oh, and if you read the bottom one, it says if they're unable to do their job for the medical related pregnancy job, or the employer or the covered entity must treat her in the same way as it treats other temporarily disabled employees. So I don't. It's kind of hard to see because the screenshot wasn't very well.
And then you also submitted this page, which looks like it was the letter that you sent to the investigator. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right. Um, Let me just take a quick look at that and make sure I don't have any questions for you. I think we pretty much addressed that because we talked about the dates, and then you talked about that you were trained in multiple areas. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about this letter at all?
No, ma'am.
All right. Anything else you want to testify about?
Not that I could think of. No.
Miss Ochoa, do you have any questions for Miss Holmes at all?
Not at this time.
All right. Just want to make sure, Miss Holmes, any other evidence you want to provide?
I'm actually looking through my. Um, no, just that I've stayed in the same field throughout my whole pregnancy. So, and again, I was hired on to another job with the same restrictions. So I just feel like it could have been accommodated. That's all.
Okay. Then if you don't have anything further, Miss Holmes, I will start with you, Miss Ochoa. If you could raise your right hand, Miss Ochoa. Do you solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the testimony you will give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I will.
All right, you can put your hand down. Um, and you currently work for Oakwood Village, is that correct?
I do. I work for Oakwood Village University Homes. That's our parent company.
Okay. And when did you begin working there?
July 20th, 2021.
And I believe in previous communications, you've identified yourself as the HR director. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm the Talent Acquisition and Human Resources Director
Okay.
for the Prairie Ridge campus.
And is that the position you've held since you began in July of 2021?
That is correct.
Okay. And then you heard Ms. Holmes testify about how she felt like there could have been some accommodations for her work restrictions. Now, I know just based on the date that you told us that you started working there, it sounds like you were not involved in Ms. Holmes's employment or the decision to terminate her employment at all. Is that correct?
That is
But as I stated, you did hear her testify about possibly restrict or accommodations based on her restrictions. Based on your work that you do for Oakwood, does Oakwood have any kind of policies or procedures in place that deal with accommodations in the workplace at all? And we'll kind of start general, and then we can always get more specific as it relates to any kind of pregnancy restrictions, but just kind of starting broadly. Do you have any policies that deal with just any kind of restrictions that someone may have where they're unable to do their jobs?
Yes. Yes, we do.
And I guess getting a little bit more restrictive then, do you have policies in place to help individuals who are pregnant and maybe have some restrictions in place related to their pregnancy?
Specifically, as in just calls out pregnancy as we would accommodate pregnancy.
Yes.
Not know if we have anything that specific with pregnancy only.
So then what do you have in place if you could summarize it for me?
Yes. Well, we have a protocol in place if and when somebody comes to us with restrictions, whether it's for intermittent leave, a continuous leave request, workers' compensation, whatever they have come forward with, we take a look at the job description. We then look at what is required. We look at the day in the life of that individual in that job, and we try to determine what is the safest thing, not only for the employee and or the resident. And so we take a look at we can accommodate, what we cannot accommodate. Sometimes we are able to provide limited duties or activities that that individual can do within their restrictions. But ultimately, the decision is made what is best for the resident and what is best for the employee to keep everyone safe on a consistent basis.
uh, Ms. Holmes had testified about, I guess, first of all, and again, I understand you weren't working there in 2020, September 2020, when she was working there, but she had mentioned something about, checking temperatures and having some position available that someone could sit at the front door and check people's temperatures. During your employment, did Oakwood still have that in place? That no, okay.
We have machines called AccuShield, and they've been in place for a while now, that take everything. It's all done by machine and it's scanned. There is no position for that.
Right. What about Ms. Holmes had talked about different types of duties that she might have been able to do. Um, do you ever do something like that where, if someone has a lifting restriction, but, they can clean or pass meds or, do those types of duties? Is that something that Oakwood would consider as, maybe we'll take away some duties, but we'll give them other duties that are within their work restrictions?
Yes, yes, we have. She had mentioned med passing. Med passing only happens twice during a particular shift. So therefore, it does not equate to a full 8 hours worth of work. There is no guarantee. When you look at the job description, number 2 item, she had mentioned the 2-person lift, 1-person lift. We have falls, and we do have falls in what she considered independent living. We call it health and wellness. And unfortunately, that is not a guarantee. And so, being able to predict what all resident needs are going to be on a consistent basis. She had mentioned serving food, but our resident assistants, along with the dietary aides, often will have to use the warmer plates. And if you're not familiar with that, Judge, they're usually the big serving trays that are then set in, and then they serve the food from there to the residents in assisted living. So she was working in assisted living. It's a possibility she could have been using those as well. So we do look at the holistic job description to determine what we could do safely and consistently for the safety of the residents and the employee.
Okay, I want to take a look at some of the documents that you submitted during the or just recently. So this first one here, I believe, is the information that was submitted during the investigation of the complaint. Again, I don't believe you were involved in creating this document. Is that correct? But it's something that is in, I guess I should ask, where was this kept in like an employment file for Ms. Holmes, or how did you become aware of it?
Yes, anytime a civil rights case comes, we create an electronic file, and we keep all documentation for that trial and any exhibits that we have put with it in that electronic file. And that is where I found this.
Okay. And it was looks like created by Emily Knudsen, who I believe is one of the people that we had a little bit of testimony about. It looks like she was the HR director at some point. Was she there at all during your employment?
No, I replaced her.
Okay. Okay. The second document here that you submitted looks to be a job description. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And is there anything, I mean, I'm assuming you've had a chance to look over this document. Is it your testimony that this job description adequately provides the duties of a resident assistant?
Yes, it is not an all-inclusive list. There is a bullet at the end as needed, other duties assigned, but this is the majority of the time at any given point as a resident assistant, you can be doing these responsibilities and activities.
Okay. And this is the job description for all resident assistants. And I say that just because Ms. Holmes had testified about, depending on where you were working, the job duties of a resident assistant might be a little bit different versus, she had mentioned that there was independent living, a memory care, and an assisted living facility. So do you believe that depending on which one of those you were working in, your job duties as a resident assistant may differ?
Yes.
No,
Oh, are
I'm
you?
talking to
Oh, okay.
Miss Ochoa.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, it depends. She kind of, just to kind of, because she misspoke on several points. So Oakwood is actually, we have two campuses. We have the Prairie Ridge campus, which is where she resided and worked in. And then there's University Woods, which is the west side of Madison. Here, there isn't independent campuses. It is all one campus. We do have independent living, and there are several names for each of the buildings, but they're all independent living, which we call health and wellness. And that would be like Settlers Ridge, Pioneer Prairie, Ivory Sage, and Blue Stem. So those would be the independent living. We also have Sweetgrass as well. Our assisted living / memory care is called Meadows. We have Seasons, and we have the Knoll. And again, these are households. We also have the HRC, which is the Health Rehabilitation Center and Rehab. That is separate, and only CNAs would be working in that facility. So she would not have worked in that facility, and she was not licensed to work as a CNA. So at that time, she was only able to be a resident assistant, which meant that she would have predominantly been scheduled in the assisted living and any one of the households in assisted living. And depending on the residents and resident needs, her duties could change.
Okay. And I forgot to ask Ms. Holmes, she had mentioned CBRF. Do you know what that means?
It's a care facility. It's the care regulated facility.
Okay.
So we're regulated by the state, and you have to be certified to work in the AL as a resident aide. So we typically do the CBFR training certification for any new resident aides within the first 90 days, which is what we're required to by regulation.
Okay. The next job document was, we already had some testimony about that, the medical restriction that Ms. Holmes says she provided. Was this again kept in some kind of electronic file for the case or her personnel file?
It was kept with the original letter as the respondent, as one of the exhibits provided, attachments.
Okay.
I think it was attachment C is what it was noted on the original letter.
Okay. All right. And then this looks to be a policy, a handbook policy. Is that correct?
Next, I think, are the two policies. We have one in our employee handbook. We have the employment at will policy, as well as the first 90 days. So you can see under the new hire orientation training period, we do have a probationary period with, at any moment, depending on what we feel, we can terminate employment at any time. We also have we do have the SEIU union that represents the resident assistants, and our Article 15.3 of that agreement states very clearly during the probationary period, a staff member, which would have been Jane, retention shall be entirely within the discretion of the employer.
Okay, and I think you're reading down
Yep.
15.3.
Termination of seniority, correct.
Okay. And you said this is part of an agreement with a union, is that correct? And what was the name of the union again?
SEIU.
Right. Ms. Ochoa, was there anything else you wanted to testify about this case?
Just make sure to clarify several points that she was unable to. She did have a reporting supervisor that was Lynette White, and she was the director of assisted living. There were supervisors that would run the shifts on the floor, and we had multiple of those that would, depending on the day, would run that household that she would report to. Nurse Karen Brennan was the person that she spoke with during orientation and went through the fit test and the TB test, and she didn't remember, and provided the documentation that we were first notified of the pregnancy. I also want to talk about, just kind of go back to the original letter, just because I wasn't here, and this is their account, Lynette and Emily's account of the situation. And based on the note, they exercised the right to terminate due to the fact that they felt that they could not consistently accommodate safely for the residents and or for her. And so they felt it best to have terminated employment. And what she failed to recognize is they did say that she could be rehired when safe to do so. So they made the best decision based on the restrictions that the doctor provided in that time.
Is there anything else you want to testify about?
So,
Ms. Holmes, did you have any questions for Ms. Ochoa?
Not for Ms. Ochoa, no.
All right. I just want to make sure, Ms. Ochoa, anything else on behalf of the respondent?
no, again, I just want to reiterate, she was terminated due to the restrictions because we could not accommodate her safely, nor for the residents. And we felt that at that time it was best to terminate the employment and let her know when it's safe to do so to reapply. And there were no protections under FMLA at that time as well, given she was less than 30 days into her employment.
All right. Ms. Holmes, do you have anything else based on what you've heard Ms. Ochoa testify about? Anything else you want to mention?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
As Ms. Ochoa stated, that there's only 2 med passes and other things like that. But I've as working in, I've done this for 12 years. So any time somebody comes with restrictions, yes, there's only 2 med passes, but in between the med passes, there could have been, laundry, cleaning, and all that, other things that could have, that I could have been doing, and instead of just, I don't mean just doing what med passes and that's it. I mean, there could have been a bunch of jobs that I could have done besides lifting, that would have helped the team out even, as staffing was already short due to COVID. So if there was people on the floor that could have done the lifting, I could have done everything else besides the lifting. Empty trashes, for example, I could have kept busy is what I'm trying to say, instead of just doing 2 med passes in my whole 8-hour shift. I realized that.
How many people, when you were scheduled to work, how many people were also scheduled to work? Because you had just mentioned, if there was other people on the floor, how did that work?
Depending on where I was working, so in the eight, I can't think of what it was called again. That I kept calling it independent living. I can't think of what it's called now. It was just there was usually two of us, and we would go our own ways wherever. But as like Noel, as she said, Blue Ivy, all them, there was more than one person scheduled on that shift. Sometimes two, sometimes three, sometimes four. I think it was all depending on, like I said, they were short staffing because of COVID. So it depended on how many people they had, I guess.
Anything else, Ms. Holmes, you want to testify about?
I don't. Oh, and then I guess under the Pregnancy Act, I felt like I seen the policy of the termination of seniority and all that, but I feel like that falls in a different category. I don't know for sure, just under the Federal Pregnancy Law Act, but I don't know if that's facts or not. I just felt like it did when I was reading upon doing all my reading, basically.
What do you mean by that? It falls into a different category?
I think it well, I don't. I guess not falls in it. I was curious if it did fall into a different category since there's a federal law act out there. Um, I'm not sure though.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you think that the federal pregnancy law may mean that people with pregnancy should be treated differently than people without pregnancies, but I guess do you think that someone who's pregnant and has a restriction should be treated differently than someone who has some other type of restriction that is not pregnancy related?
I don't know if that's. I just thought that's what how I that's what I was kind of when I was reading it. That's what I thought, but I don't know if that's true or not.
Okay.
I don't think that it should be like that. But I didn't know with the Pregnancy Law Act if that was true.
And you had testified, Miss Holmes, earlier that there was this one woman who had a knee injury and that you felt that she was accommodated. I forgot to ask, were you aware of any other employees that had any kind of restrictions or injuries that limited their ability to work while you worked at Oakwood?
I don't, but now that I'm remembering, and she said the Meadows, I do remember that that lady's with the leg injury was working in the Meadows. That's where she would normally be scheduled um, if she wasn't doing temperatures at the door.
And so she typically worked at the Meadows, but she would be doing temperatures at the door where?
When you first walk into the building,
Is that Prairie Ridge or someplace else?
I'm not sure what it's called now. I just the whole facility I thought was called Oakwood. I don't really know what it
Okay.
was called. I just know when you walk in the door and then there's a temperature taker and then all different ways is where Blue Ivy, the Meadows, the independent living, stuff like that. So
And the Meadows was what was the Meadows? Was that independent living or was that one of the other?
I want to say that was like memory care. I want to
Okay.
say that was like the memory. No, I think Ivy was memory. I think maybe assisted living was the Meadows. I'm not really sure. It was a unit inside of one of them.
Okay.
They have a lot of different names, so I don't really recall.
Anything else, Ms. Holmes, you want to testify about?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Ochoa, was there anything else you wanted to testify about?
Just again, correction, her rate of pay was $14.46 an hour.
All right.
And you had mentioned the check-in points. We had two machines. One was located in the Health Rehabilitation Center, and one was located at the front main entrance. And those were where the stations were.
Again, when I worked there was no machines. People did the temperatures and stickers.
Okay.
They're in the same spot.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Um, Anything else, Ms. Ochoa, that you wanted to testify about? Ms. Holmes, anything you wanted to testify about?
No. Thank you.
All right, so we've gone over the exhibits. Miss Ochoa, did you have any objections to my receiving the two exhibits that Miss Holmes had identified that we discussed? The one that's on the screen, the letter that she sent to the investigator, and then this printout about pregnancy discrimination?
I do not. I have
All
both
right.
of those.
All right, so then I will mark and receive both of those exhibits. And then Ms. Holmes, I went over well one or two of the exhibits with you, but also the five exhibits that Ms. Ochoa had identified. Did you have any objections to my receiving any of those five exhibits? Okay. So then I will mark and receive as well the respondents' five exhibits that we've discussed. I'll look at those exhibits when I'm making my decision in this case. I just want to make sure, is there anything else either one of you want to discuss or testify about this afternoon?
No, ma'am.
It's time.
All right, so then we actually got done even earlier and sooner than I thought we would today. As I stated, I will be issuing a written decision. We try to get those out within 90 days. I am getting a little bit behind in some of my decisions, so it might take a little bit longer than that. But I would just ask that if anybody's address or anything changes within the next 90 days or so, just to follow up with me. We do issue the decision in writing and it's mailed out to the party. So that's why I'm saying if your address has changed, just let us know. Because depending on what my decision is, the parties will have an opportunity to appeal it, and that's pretty time extensive. So we just want to make sure that everybody gets that in a timely manner. But as long as there's no other testimony that either one of you want to give, I'll close the record at this point. And then, like I said, I'll be issuing a decision sometime in the next few months. So thank you for your time. And again, appreciate you being able, both of you, to reschedule the hearing, or I should say, have the hearing this afternoon rather than trying to fit it in at a different date or time. So thank you for doing that, both of you, and thanks for your time this afternoon. Take care.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye
you.
now.
Bye now.